it's Tim Holtz, and today I am excited to share the sweetest new addition to the Sizzix Village series, and that is the new Village Gingerbread. And this is perfect for the holiday season because this will make a wonderful candy creation out of the Village die. So let's talk real quick about the Village series. There's a whole lot of other dies that you can use to dress up the Village, but again, they all start with that core foundation, and that is the dwelling itself, which is a Biggs XL. It's a steel rule die. So it is important if you're going to try to create this Village series that you start out with the basic dwelling, and then all of these other accessory dies, the winter overlay, the bell tower, the manor, the surf shack, and of course the gingerbread. These are all designed to go over the top of that particular structure. So this is really a great die because it's full of fun detail that we can use to dress this up and create this little gingerbread. It really reminds me of a kid and kind of making this with candy canes and Necco wafers and all those delicious things when we're working on our house. So what this die cuts out, it is a steel rule die. It is a Biggs, and it cuts out the accessories to create this little guy. So what we get is this scallop roof, and I'll talk a little bit about how to create this to make it look like the candy wafers. It also has the top of this roof piece. This is going to be this part right here. Candy cane. Now, of course, you'll need to cut these in opposite directions if you want to use those this way. And that's the fun of this, is you can decorate these however you want. You don't have to put the candy canes on the front porch if you don't want to. Then we have some other pieces. We've got this little kind of rickrack, and what this is kind of to mimic icicles or icing, and they'll fit on the front of the dormer, but they'll also fit on both sides. So you would cut that piece 3 times, you would have one for each side, and then you would just trim off the excess to fit the front of your house. Then we've got some other pieces here. We've got this little ring and this little bow. This was really just to create kind of a lifesaver and a little licorice bow that I used on the front door there, and I'll go into a little bit more detail of how I decorate these pieces. Then we've got these 2 elements, and this is to make a peppermint. So we've got our base and we've got the swirl, and the cool thing about this, of course, this can be painted any color you want. I just chose mine just traditional red and white, and you can get as fun and creative as you want with that. We've got this little gumdrop. Now you need to cut several of these depending on how many gumdrops you want to use. I just used them on the sides of the house, but I would imagine you could even do gumdrop shingles or for your fence. For the fence, though, I used a pretzel. I thought the pretzel was really a fun way to go in and accent the base with just a couple of pretzel pieces for the fence. And then we have this shuttered window, and this is great because it's got those little hearts cut out into it, and you can create these kind of shuttered windows that we can put onto our gingerbread. So let's talk about how this can go together and some of the pieces, and I'll share with you some tips of what I did to embellish it. Of course, like with any structure, I always start with just the basic dwelling cut out of cardstock. You can use index stock or craft. It's much easier to do this out of paper than it is chipboard, especially when you're building the structure itself, simply because of all the folds. So I would suggest just starting with your basic structure. And again, this is just index stock. Then we can go in and start adding our siding. So again, this started out just as the basic, and then I went in and started adding the siding pieces. And what I chose for siding, the Ideology substrate sheets. This is kind of a flexible material. It's actually kind of a fabric-y paper. It's sold in a pack like this. You get 3 different colors. You get this really great craft color, you also get white, and you get this dark brown. And the neat thing about this, it's really pliable. You can't tear it unless you cut it, then you can rip it. But I like the fact that I can sew through it, I can ink it, paint it, sand it, stain it, wash it, dry it. This is from kind of the fabric world initially, which is really cool. But my favorite thing, and how this differs a lot from grunge paper, is the fact that I can cut substrate sheet with not only thick dies, but also thin dies. So you can take any of your thinlits or other thin dies, even that intricate doily, and you can cut through this substrate sheet to have some flexible medium. And that's what I like, especially when we're creating the details like the windows and stuff. I'll cut it out of substrate. But I chose to use this as the side of my house. So once I had my structure, I went in, cut it again out of substrate, and cut all the wall panels apart. Because remember, these are connected on the die like that. I went and cut them apart, cut off all the tabs, because this becomes siding. This is something that I can go in and put right on the house. And I find it much easier to create this way when I'm working on any structure. I even talked about this on the winter die. You can use any type of adhesive. You can go in, you can try Xyron if you have a Xyron. I just prefer to use a liquid adhesive. You could use collage medium, glossy accents. It really doesn't matter. I would just say depending on your siding, because maybe you're cutting this out of, I don't know, a wood veneer or something like that. You may want to utilize that. I'm just using a quick dry glue just to stick that on, just to show you how easy it is just to kind of put on your siding. And this one I'm going to do pretty quick because I want to share some ways that we can go in and alter this even further. So just for the purpose of this video, I'm just going to glue a couple of these panels on. Ideally though, when I am working on this, I will do the walls and I will even do the rooftop when I'm doing this. And then I will glue the siding on and then I'll go in and do the porch. So this is a piece that I wouldn't normally have this stoop on there. I could just tear this off just so you can see. If I was going to do the front piece, I would then just go in and glue the front piece on there and decide whether I wanted to keep the door or not. And then you'd put on the porch. All right, so have a couple of panels on there. That's easy enough to understand, okay? Then we've got some accents. So let's talk about some of the accents here. So we've got our walls, and the walls I'll talk about how we change the color and do all of that. But we've got these windows, and the windows are really great because we can utilize the details of this die to create them. So when I go and cut the windows, I cut it out of white. Now again, I use substrate sheet, but you could use cardstock or whatever you want. I cut the entire thing out white, and then I cut it again out of this craft color. On the white piece though, I cut off both of the shutters, both of these sides. This way I can glue this together, and now I've got a shuttered window. That was just by choice. So this doesn't have to be white, this could be any color, but that is how I went in and did that double window. I suppose you could paint it. There's a lot of different ways that you can do this, but I'm just sharing kind of how I did that. So I cut that, inked it, and I'll even glue this one down just to show. And I think the shutters are really nice, especially out of something that is flexible, because it does give me the ability to bend them and have them stay flexible, and I don't have to worry about them falling off the village if they get open and closed too many times. All right, so I'm just going to glue that down. Now, when we're working with these shuttered windows, let me share another little tip. You can see that it has these small little hearts that cut out, and it also has these little louvers. And you can just go in with your blending tool and you can ink this. I just like to take distress ink. You can take walnut stain, you can take whatever color you want, and just take a blending tool, dip that in, and just go right around those edges just to give it kind of that vintage look. And that's the same thing that you can do once you have all the walls of your house. You can just go in and ink that. Substrate sheet takes ink really well, but it also will give it just kind of a nice shading. Simple to do. Then we have some other elements. I mentioned this little rickrack. This is something that would get glued on. Of course, my whole house would be covered and you would just glue this on. I like to use hot glue for things like this. Anything that has just kind of a short little hanging point, I like to use hot glue. It's just easier to stick down. So we would have that. We would even have our windows, and you get the idea. We would just be really dressing it up at this point, still building the house before we start getting into all of the fun details. So once we have the house pretty much constructed with our siding, our windows, our shutters, all of that, then we'll get into some of the decorative elements, which I think are really unique. And that would be all of these candy elements and the roof. So let's talk about this. Now, the roof, you're going to need to cut this several times. I cut it 11 times, but you can play around. If you can find less, that's fine. But I wanted to point out how I did these particular tiles because I like the illusion or the effect that this looks like individual shingles kind of tucked under one another. But in fact, it isn't. It's simply just this scallop that's part of the die. So here's what I did. Once I die cut a bunch of these strips, I went in with several colors of distress paint. And I used a lot of light colors. I used spun sugar for the pink. I went in and used squeezed lemonade for yellow, little dried marigold, tumbled glass, cracked pistachio, and shaded lilac. Those are the colors I chose just to kind of mimic that palette. But again, you can use any colors you want. And so what I do first is I cut out several of these strips. I cut them all out, all 11 of them. Then I just go in just with a flat paintbrush, take my paint, and I'll just start painting individual tiles on all of the strips. You can make them match if you want, but it really doesn't matter. The more random, the better. So I just go in and paint all the blue, then I'll go in and paint all the pink, so on and so forth. That's what we've done here. All the strips are painted. Once it's dry, I go in and I sand it. So you can see from that painted section to the sanded section, it just kind of roughs up the edge. And I just go in and use a sanding grip. And the sanding grip allows me to go in and scuff this. Now, I chose to do my roof tiles out of grunge board. Sadly, grunge board is being retired, so it's no longer going to be available. So if you can still get your hands on grunge board, great. Otherwise, you can do chipboard. You could even do substrate. I just wanted these a little thicker. You can kind of see how thick that is. So this is just something that I went in and sanded the edges. And I do all of that. So I'll paint everything. Then once it's dry, I'll go and sand everything. And then we go from this step to this step. And this is where we start kind of identifying or singling out each individual tile. And to do that, it's pretty easy. I'll just go in with my die pick. So the Sizzix die pick, if you have a craft pick or a push pin, and I just take this and I scratch right into that material. And I'll just go right over. This way you don't have to worry about your paint lines being straight or masking anything, because you're really going to gouge and create a groove in between each of those tiles. And I do that to all of those pieces. Then it's back to my distress ink and my blending tool. When I go in and ink that, now take a look at that. Now you can really see the difference between that and that. And again, you can use any color, but I like to do walnut stain. It gives me kind of the most drama, but now it looks like individual tiles. And what I do is once I have all of my strips done, the easiest way to assemble the roof, believe it or not, is not first. I think some people would think, okay, I'm just gonna go in and I'm gonna take this, I'm gonna glue all my tiles, and then I'm gonna try to add the dormer. If you do that, it's gonna make your roof so thick right here where this piece connects that it's going to pop this up. So I literally build the entire roof the way it is first. And then I will go in and start building. I'll take a strip, and if I need to cut this at an angle, I'll snip this at an angle and glue it all the way up to that edge. Then I'll take the next piece, again, cut it at an angle. So it's just taking your scissors. It doesn't take much, and I said, okay, I need to follow that. If you just go in and just start cutting with your scissor, it's pretty easy to figure that out. So see, I'll glue that, and then I'll cut off that tile. Then I'll take this, cut another angle, and keep gluing it. And as you start stacking, you'll see that these tiles will just alternate. They'll just kind of fall into place. And I do that all the way up. And by doing this, I use less strips, first of all. Second of all, I don't have to worry about it getting too thick behind the roof of the house. So I'll glue all of these pieces. And then when you get to the top, then it becomes an entire strip, except this middle one where you just notch out the center there. And then you have that top one. Now the back, of course, that's really easy because you can start at the bottom. Now what you'll notice, and I'll show you just from a full-size strip, the strip itself is longer than the roof, right? And the reason we did that is we wanted the length to be different, so when we start, we can start on one area, and when you glue the other one, you can alternate. So this gives you some play to create that alternating pattern in your tiles. That's why these pieces are longer, allowing you to cut off the excess wherever you need it. So that was done by design because I really wanted to create kind of this candy roof that I remember as a kid. So that's why we have these longer pieces. But the roof, pretty easy to do, isn't it? Okay, so once that roof is on there, then we have this top piece. And that top piece, again, I just cut out of a piece of substrate. It already has that crease in there, and I've just glued that over the top. And that's gonna hide all of the ugly because once you get to the top of your roof, you'll have two of these pieces and it kind of looks like that. So this piece you just glue right over the top, that hides everything. All right, then we get into the sweet treats. So the sweet treats, there's a lot of different ways that we can alter these. Again, I chose distress paint for all of my coloring. You can play around with ink if you want. I just find paint gives me kind of the most opaque, vibrant color. So the pretzels, I just painted those brown, gave them just a little bit of a salt fleck, and I'll talk about that. The gumdrops, painted those, and everything that I paint, I still sand a little bit and ink a little bit, but these are very sugary, and to create that sugar effect, I just used a little bit of glossy accents, and while that was wet, applied some Distress Rock Candy glitter. This is that clear glitter that does in fact look like sugar. So I just went in and used that over the tops. I did the same thing on the little bow. Now, the peppermint, the candy canes, and the little Lifesaver wreath, I went and painted those, sanded, inked it, and then I just went over that with a layer of glossy accents. let that dry, and you can see that everything, like, you know, the peppermints have that real nice shiny candy finish from the glossy accents, and then you can see those gumdrops really sparkle from the rock candy. Pretty cool. So that's what I've done to the effects. But now, how do we stick it all down? Because let's face it, when you're a kid and you work with gingerbread, it was all about the icing, right? So the icing is actually pretty simple stuff. What I used for the icing is texture paste. Took a palette knife. Then I went to the dollar store and picked up one of these cake decorating kits for $1. It was just $1. And all I did was open up the bag, put on this little tip, this unscrews, and you can choose your tip. I chose the smallest tip for that. Opened up the bag itself, and because it is a vinyl bag, your paste is going to stay wet. So even if you don't use it all, you can fold this, clip it, and it will be airtight if you put this in a bag. And I took this large palette knife, just scooped some out, and just added some. I didn't fill the entire bag. I just did 2 or 3 scoops till I had some down at the bottom. And then when we have our house, we're just gonna, again, just like when we were kids. Remember we got that icing bag. It was like, could not wait. But for me, I didn't have one of these fancy ones. I think it was a plastic bag with the corner cut off. But you know, same thing. This is just going to allow us to squeeze, and I'll just show you on the craft sheet. And there's our little icing. Look at that. So I just go in and I'll start right on the corner and I'll just add the icing. Yep. Wherever you need to add, if you want to kind of fill in your roof line, you can really put that however you want. And then when I wanted to decorate it, I used it just as my glue. I just took that just as if I were doing one, because I wanted to be able to have that ooze. Remember, just like when we were making these as kids, we always had that little bit of icing right there, and we push it down and we get that bit to ooze. And if I didn't get it to ooze like that one, I would even sit there and slide it down just so I'd get that effect. Or you could lift it off and add more. But that's how simple this is. And the reason I wanted to use something like texture paste is I wanted it to stay flexible after it dries. That's what I like about working with, oh, I'm kind of messy trying to do 2 things at once here. I like the fact that once this dried, this would totally stay flexible. And I don't have to worry about it breaking off. Isn't that cool? It just gives such a great realistic icing. And again, I think the messier the better. You know, you can see I added some around here. And if you want it to sparkle a little bit while this is wet, you can take that rock candy glitter and you can throw some of that on there. And you could even have some of the sparkly icing like you can see here on the roof line. I don't know if the light's going to pick it up, but I did go in and throw some of that rock candy on there. But that's how simple it is to change a surface like this. Add your substrate sheets or any kind of craft paper for your gingerbread. You can make all of your candy pieces using glossy accents and rock candy and all of your glitter. Then you can go in and make all your colorful tile roof pieces just to add. And again, build your house first, and then you can go in and add all of your little candy wafer shingles, which I think makes it so good. And you can add as many candy pieces as you want. I didn't do much back here, but gosh, we could add as much of that stuff as we want to. And then for my base, same thing. I just took some of that excess texture paste and just kind of spread it on that surface, sprinkled in some glitter, and just added a couple of pretzels for the fence. I didn't bother going all the way around, but I just think that makes it so great. And we can light this up with a tea light. Again, this would be great glued. Now, I've had a lot of people that shared some great ideas for ornaments for the holidays. If you glue this, you can kind of cut a hole in the bottom and put a Christmas light in there. And when you hang this on the tree, the light is lighting it up in there. You could even go in from the back window because it's already open if you want to put a light bulb in there too. But I think that's great. So for the finishing touch, of course, is what's on the top, powdered sugar, right? If you ever wanted that snowy effect, we want some powdered sugar. And what I used for that is I just took picket fence and I took the splatter brush. And this is the exact same way that I went in and added the little salt speckles to the pretzel. And to do that, it's really quite simple. I'll just give you a quick demo here. Let me just get rid of this icing, quote unquote. And I'll just take a substrate just so you can see. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to shake up the Distress Paint. Distress Paint has the perfect viscosity for splattering. Not too thick, not too wet. So if you have regular thick paint, you may want to kind of wet it down because you need the consistency of ink. I'm going to sweep this up. I'm going to hold the brush, point it towards me with the skinny side. I'm going to grab the middle of this, and I'm just going to slowly release this. And as I'm releasing it, you can see that it creates that easy snow pattern. And the more you splatter it, the more sugar we would be adding to our cool and festive gingerbread. So I hope you have fun making this new addition to the Sizzix Village, especially for the holidays. The Village Gingerbread, really sweet as can be.